Let's exit. Okay, I think we're good now. I think we're good. Okay, hey, there it is. We got sound. It's been a minute since we've done this. We've had so many setbacks with the podcast and all that I forget I have to turn on my streaming client. I have to turn on my Audacity before or I'm sorry, after I turn on the mixer. Amateur hour. Fucking amateur hour. Anyway, let's get the show on the road. This is basically going to be the first episode of kind of a new format I'm testing out. Let me just go ahead and share this. I'm getting all this crap out of the way before I actually start putting this on Audacity, because it's kind of a way for me to kill two birds with one stone. Let me just put up the link and go from there. But yeah, basically it's a new format of the show, something I can kind of stretch my creative muscles a little bit. Hope this all goes well. I just need to go to long shots, post the same dang thing, and I will get this going. Kind of doing it like story time style almost. You know. All right. And we're going to go ahead and officially get this going now. Let me go ahead and start my Audacity. Okay. Hey, what's going on? This is episode number 52 of Long Shots Sportscast. But it is also the first episode of our new direction, kind of the new sub-series that I'm kind of rolling with. I'm tentatively calling it The Other Timeline. And to explain, it's basically kind of going through all of sports' greatest what-ifs. And I'm just kind of giving my best spin on each one. It just got to coming to me. I was getting kind of burned out doing the show, just talking about like stuff anybody can read, with the guys. And it's fun to kick back and just shoot the shit and talk sports. But this stuff, it's the same stuff we cover all week at work. And then we're just doing it in front of microphones, and we're doing it for next to nobody. And we're not doing it better than or as good as a bunch of people, there's nothing that we had been doing outside of some funny jokes or opinions here and there that nobody, hundreds of thousands of people had been doing for, I wouldn't say hundreds of thousands, but hundreds of channels, be it actual TV or YouTube or whatever, have been doing better than us. And for hundreds of thousands of our audience, so I kind of want to take it into a different direction. And I was just talking to Brady about how we need to kind of spruce the show up and spice it up and make it something cool. And I hit him with kind of a fun fact about Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. And I was thinking, what if the Nuggets never traded them? And I kind of got to my desk. I got to brainstorming a little bit at work, and then it hit me. I'm like, that's the show, is just covering the greatest what ifs. And for me, it's something that I can appropriately sink my teeth into and use my imagination and my love of stats and my love of sports and drum up some possible timeline, if you will, drum up this other universe where this decision sports wise does happen. I think it's something that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you all. And I thought, what better way, especially because we're based in the Pacific Northwest, what better way to start than the greatest what if in PNW sports history? What if the Blazers did not pass on Michael Jordan? In 1984, obviously the Portland Trailblazers picked second overall. Houston picked first, and they picked Hakeem Olajuwon. Also, don't mind this picture to my right. I just wanted my video feed to be scaled properly. And I just needed something to fill the dead space, and I thought that picture was really funny. Getting back to it, though, the 1984 draft. Obviously, Houston took Hakeem Olajuwon, the dream. And that put the Blazers at second with an interesting decision. And they, of course, picked Sam Bowie, who would go on to be often injured and overall a bust for his NBA career. And the man who would go after Sam Bowie, well, he's about as synonymous with basketball as Babe Ruth is to baseball. And that would, of course, be Michael Jordan. So the big burning question on the minds of Blazers fans for close to 40 years now has been, what if the Blazers took Michael Jordan, didn't pass on Sam Bowie? So that's what I'm going to tackle right here. I've got my notes. I'm going to go full steam ahead into it, and I have some rules. Getting into this whole sim thing. First things first, I'm covering strictly 84 to 98. So 84, 85 to 97, 98. And then he does his second retirement and goes off, and Kwame Brown gets his feelings hurt. Sorry, Kwame. So my rules here are, there's two things that for sure happen, that happen in real life no matter what, and that are the retirements. Sorry, those are the retirements. Number one, when he left to go play baseball, and that would be after the 92 season, if I have that right. Yeah, 92-93 season. He abruptly retires just prior to the 93-94 season to go play baseball, where he would kind of stink it up in the minors for a little bit and then come back about a year and a half later. That's number one. Number two is, of course, the second retirement after ring number 6 in real life. 97-98 Bulls, the last dance, as it were. Jordan retires again, and then from there he becomes an executive with the Washington Wizards. The way I see it, regardless of whether he's a Bull or a Blazer, he's gonna go do that stuff, no matter what. Maybe not necessarily Washington, but maybe so with Washington. I honestly don't know. It doesn't matter, because it doesn't pertain to him being in a Chicago or Portland uniform. So those are my rules. Also, teams don't get the benefit of hindsight on each year's draft. For instance, I believe it's 85. Karl Malone gets picked like 13th or something like that. He would probably be the best player in that draft. He's not going to go number one. I'm keeping it as realistic as possible. So if a guy like Karl Malone slips to 13 in real life, that's where he's going to stay. The only team that gets the benefit of hindsight is the Portland Trailblazers, for this one variable that creates this alternate timeline. So from there, it's only apropos that we get this on the road. And we're starting it off big. We're starting it off with the 84 draft. So, 1984 draft, there's only a couple big moves here that really need to be broadcast. Anything else will fall in line as it's supposed to. So, Houston Rockets, of course, they're up first. They take Hakeem Olajuwon, of course. As everybody knows, Hakeem the Dream. He goes number one and is kind of going to be the guy to lead Houston into the future. Tremendous center in real life. One of those dominant players for his size in terms of his ability to shake off defenders and post up big, despite being how tall he was, and he can block shots like nobody's business too. He's one of the few players that Shaq puts in that echelon at or above himself. That's like him. I believe he said the same thing about Patrick Ewing. There's only a handful of guys that Shaq gives that level of praise to, and Hakeem's at the top of that list. So he goes number 1. Now we get to Portland. Portland the year prior had actually taken Hakeem's Phi Slamma Jamma college teammate, Clyde the Glide Drexler, in the 83 draft. They are looking to add another piece to go with their budding star. And they, of course, take Michael Jordan here. This will be the guy here. They're going to kind of go 2 wings, which is, different in the 80s. In the 80s, it was a big man-driven philosophy over there. And that kind of held on for a long time. You can kind of almost put it on a team like the Warriors, who was able to kind of, they were able to kind of step away from that. Over time, big men, while still useful and some are still, amazing, guys like Joel Embiid, they don't make or break a team. The Warriors had 2 great wing players, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, who could just rain threes on people with a small ball scheme. And the best, all they really needed at big was Andrew Bogut, who was on his way out, or Zaza Pachulia, stuff like that. But in the 80s, that's kind of the big man philosophy. Thus, why Sam Bowie went second in real life. Here, Portland takes MJ. Now, Chicago, already having 4 centers on their roster, they do not take Sam Bowie. They instead take Charles Barkley. Barkley would originally go to the Philadelphia 76ers. So the rest of the draft shakes out. My goodness, hiccups are coming at the worst time. The rest of the draft shakes out as normal. John Stockton goes to the Jazz. He was in this draft. Sam Bowie winds up with the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, the 76ers were kind of an odd position. This is why, what was interesting for Barkley getting drafted there. They were a team already in contention. They were only a couple years removed from winning a title with the likes of Moses Malone, Dr. J, Maurice Cheeks. So for them, the choice of taking Sam Bowie in the first round makes some sense. You're adding some depth. You're adding a possible guy who can come in and play big and be a stud and be kind of the center for the future. But he doesn't need to start right now. Well, that's kind of the thought there. So moving along, we get into the 84-85 season. Jordan and Drexler it's clear that these 2 guys are going to be, the pair of the future. And in real life, I believe these Blazers actually made it to the second round where they fell to the Lakers. And here they fall to the Lakers again. Some things change, some things stay the same. Jordan was not a star, okay, he was a star, but he was not the GOAT overnight. In real life, Jordan, and this is the interesting thing, in this timeline, he switches conferences. In real life, obviously being in Chicago, he was part of the East. So Jordan matched up in the playoffs oftentimes against guys like Larry Bird. The Bird and Jordan was kind of a big kind of old guard meet new guard sort of rivalry in the mid to late 80s that really kind of defined the first few years of Jordan's career. We kind of see that here because for those who don't really know their 80s basketball, the 80s in the NBA were defined by one of the biggest rivalries in all of sports. And I'm talking, of course, about the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers. See, Larry Bird had another rival, a rival greater than Michael at the time, who was arguably on a stronger team, and that is, of course, Magic Johnson, with the Showtime Lakers of the late 80s to early 90s. Magic Johnson was on a team with the likes of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who, of course, is another all-time great, James Worthy as well. Just a loaded squad. And they were called Showtime for a reason. I mean, these guys really, they were just a team, just a highlight reel every game. They went up kind of against the hard-working Boston Celtics, gritty, not very glamorous, punishing basketball played by the likes of Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale. Larry Bird was a guy who was a sharpshooter before that became kind of the in thing. He could drain threes and with such accuracy, and the guy, in his own words, couldn't jump over a piece of paper. But he just was such accuracy and skill, could drain threes like nothing. And he just played with just a love and a passion for the game. This rivalry, I mean, I believe, let me just look this up real quick. They collided in the finals like 5 or 6 times in the 80s alone. The two teams would actually collide a lot in the 50s and the 60s as well, with the Celtics going to and winning 8 straight titles from 59 to 66, and winning 2 more in 68 and 69 over the Lakers. This rivalry was kind of the Bill Russell versus Jerry West sort of era, and it would be rekindled in the 80s. You know, you got the Lakers that would go on and win one in 1980. They would win one in 82. I'm sorry. They would win one in 1980. Boston would fire back in 81, and then the Lakers in 82. And then you get the Sixers that got one in 83. And then here's Boston in 84 over the Lakers, and then the Lakers over the Boston in 85, and then Boston over the Rockets in 86, and then here's the Lakers, boom boom, 87 and 88. Just the play of Bird and Johnson, was magnetic. It drew so many fans in. Fans like my dad. My dad's a big-time Lakers fan, and he'll go to his grave telling you Magic Johnson was the greatest of all time. That's a whole what-if episode in itself that I can get into later. Still, while the Bird-Jordan rivalry doesn't happen in this timeline, Johnson and Jordan does. And it's clear that Johnson is the bigger fish at this moment. So they fight hard, but they fall in the second round of the Showtime Lakers. That's just the way it's got to be. The Bulls will fall in the first round of those playoffs as well, as it's clear that the team will likely wind up building around Barkley. Fast forward, let me go to my new and improved timeline here. Fast forward 85-86. And they add, let me see here, Kevin Duckworth, Terry Porter join the Blazers here. And they will face a second round exit against Houston. Houston, of course, was a very tough squad right around this time. And Jordan, while they're building the pieces of a team that would essentially go to the titles plus Michael Jordan, Jordan is, you got to learn to walk before you can run. Not quite ready yet. And Houston had some punishing defense around this era, to the point that this was a team that actually made the finals this year, and they would lose to the Celtics. But that notwithstanding, it makes some sense to me. Fast forward to 86 and 87 now. They add Arvydas Sabonis and Drazen Petrovic, among others. And they'll make the Western Conference Finals, but they'll lose to the Lakers again. Oh, and I should add here, so as far as I'm concerned, 85-86, and now 86-87, these finals happen as they did in real life. Nothing changes yet. And right here, they'll get all the way to the Western Conference Finals. They'll lose to the Lakers in 5 games. And we fast forward now, 87-88. They'll face the Lakers again, who are en route to a finals win. They'll lose in the second round this time, just because of the way that the brackets kind of, fell out. And then we get to 88, 89. And this is the year that, Jordan and Drexler and Porter and Duckworth and Sabonis and these guys, they start to put it to, well, don't start. They put it together. Jordan, over time, he's faced Johnson so many times in the regular season, so many times ending with crushing defeat in the playoffs. And Jordan is a guy whose work ethic was on another level. He would train religiously, over and over. He would go over tape. He'd just keep going until he could conquer somebody. And this happens. They get a win in the Western Conference Finals over Showtime to make it to the 89 NBA Finals. And this will be Jordan's first trip to the dance. And they lose. Jordan and the Blazers lose to the bad boy Detroit Pistons. Jordan is not exactly familiar with the way that things work with Detroit, whereas his time on the East, he'd get bodied repeatedly. It was the Jordan rules. It was Isaiah Thomas. I don't know why I was drawing a blank on that. It was hard physical play by the likes of Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, who might be one of if not the most, the dirtiest player in NBA history, and tall, wide defense from guys like Dennis Rodman. This sort of yet Vinny the Microwave Johnson, which I still think is a great nickname. That was a tough blue collar Detroit team that played hard physical defense. Anytime Jordan is driving through the paint, they body him. And this is in the 80s. This is 80s and prior, and even early 90s, where basketball was physical and a guy could get laid out and that was it. It was just a foul, whatever. Whereas I feel like players are a little more protected. Fouls are kind of all over the place now. Not back then. Players got in a fist fight sometimes. They got fouled hard enough. And Jordan, not being as familiar with these Pistons, comes face to face with the Jordan rules pretty harshly, might I add. They lose to Detroit in 5 games. So, back to the drawing board. I should add that around this time, Rick Adelman is promoted to head coach. He would wind up being probably the best coach, best Blazers coach for a long time. He wound up getting, in real life, fired after the 94 season, which I think a lot of fans are still kind of reeling from. But no, he was a tremendous coach, and he'll get to stick around here. Spoiler. So, fast forward to 89-90, they draft center Cliff Robinson to join the team, and they rematch with Detroit in the finals. It's clear Jordan is in full swing here. It's become evident, at least within the last few years especially, that he is the future. He's the next big thing. It's about to become Jordan Mania. And Portland is about to become the most unlikely mecca for basketball. The Pacific Northwest are about to really get lit up here. I should also add, let me make sure, because I think I just missed it. Hang on. I should also add that we will rewind here. In 87, there's a big change that kind of alters the course of NBA history here. The Seattle Supersonics draft a young forward by the name of Scottie Pippen. Now, in real life, Scottie Pippen would wind up being drafted or traded to the Chicago Bulls for Holden Polynice. He would be basically Michael's kind of left-hand man. This doesn't happen in this timeline. The reason being is that Seattle and Portland were big rivals. It was called the I-5 rivalry. Seattle had a pretty good squad, already kind of built by the time they drafted Pippen in real life. And they traded him to the Bulls for Olden Polynice, who was also in the draft. as a means to sort of have that last piece to kind of go for it, you know. But looking at what Michael Jordan is, looking at the juggernaut that Portland is sort of creating here, a team that's fit to dominate the 90s. Seattle takes a sensible approach in the draft, takes a guy who's renowned for defense, has great hustle, isn't going to start right away, is going to take a couple years to cook and get ready, and kind of have a team, you know, driven around him. And they take and keep Scottie Pippen. That should be noted there. The following year, they wind up getting Shawn Kemp. And it should be noted, they wind up with Kemp and Payton regardless, because Pippen isn't going to turn it on overnight. These Sonics are still going to finish relatively the same until about, 91, 90, 90, 91-ish, when Pippen is really coming into his own. And while in Jordan's shadow in the Pacific Northwest and in the Western Conference in general, it becomes pretty apparent that Pippen's going to be, one of the next big things in basketball. It's just hard, Jordan casts such a wide shadow. So anyway, that should be noted. Now, 90, they draft Cliff Robinson. They go back to the finals, where they will meet the Detroit Pistons. Now, normally in real life, Detroit won 2 in a row. They beat the Lakers to win their first one. Obviously, the Blazers, they leap them here and get in and lose. And then they would beat the Blazers, Clyde Drexler's Blazers. Obviously, the addition of Jordan here nets, and Jordan having the experience against this team in the finals nets them the win. They win a tough 6 games, and Jordan picks up ring number 1 for the Portland Trailblazers. Fast forward to 90-91 now, and Jordan Mania has begun in Portland, and it will be in full swing for a minute now. So they go on all the way to the finals against Detroit again, with no Chicago, or with Chicago not having Jordan. The same isn't going to happen with Barkley, especially not with Pippen. He's not going to be a constant presence in the finals yet. They will take on Detroit for a 3rd time in a row and sweep them. So you see kind of a progression of Detroit doing worse each year. And of course, in the following years, Bill Laimbeer would cause an injury to Isaiah Thomas. Bill Laimbeer would actually wind up retiring in like a practice, I believe. Bill Laimbeer would wind up retiring. Isaiah Thomas not too far along behind him. And Detroit would kind of blow up for about, not really be relevant for about a decade. They would change their team colors to teal and yellow and red. That era is not really synonymous with great Pistons basketball, but I love those jerseys, and I'll fight anybody who tells me they're trash. Moving on. So we head now into, let me see here, 91-92. 91-92. So by now, Magic Johnson, the HIV thing has come out. Magic Johnson is forced to kind of abruptly retire, which sucks. Outside of that, the Blazers, business as usual. They head back to their 4th straight finals, and they will pick up their 3rd straight ring, and they're going to get it over Barkley's Bulls. They built kind of a solid team around Barkley. Barkley won't leave Chicago because he's kind of the star. He's the franchise cornerstone right off the bat. It's not a case where, like in real life, where he was drafted by Philly and he was kind of supposed to be this, the star of the future, and then he wants out and he goes to Phoenix where he's the guy over there. And then he's just never can really clean it up at the last dance. Instead, he's kind of the guy right off the bat, and his attitude and demeanor is actually kind of a fit for the gritty Chicago. So it's kind of a kind of a match made in heaven, I guess. At least in my opinion. If you're looking at Chicago as, a city as a whole and kind of the attitude there, I think Barkley would be kind of a fun fit. Well, anyway, moving on. So he'll get to the finals against Jordan's Blazers. Jordan's Blazers take him out in 5 games. I mean, this is a Blazers team that basically, this is the team that went to 2 finals plus Michael Jordan. They're going to be a powerhouse. And they are. They actually go back in 92, 93 against Chicago again, and they will beat them in 6 games. Barkley puts up a harder fight. He puts everything into it, but it's just not enough against this dominant team with the likes of Michael Jordan and, Terry Porter, Cliff Robinson, Clyde Drexler. It's just not enough. 4 straight rings in 5 straight trips to the finals for the Blazers. Now, 93-94, Jordan exits. He will retire and go play professional baseball. Professional baseball, which was, I believe, a dream of his father's, who was unfortunately killed right around this time. But instead of playing for the Chicago White Sox and their minor league affiliate, he plays for the Seattle Mariners minor league affiliate, whatever that may be. Which means that in this timeline, Jordan and Ken Griffey Jr. are quasi teammates, which is kind of fun. It's like you get the most popular basketball player and the most popular baseball player of this time, and you got them on the same team or, the same organization. I mean, that's kind of mind-blowing for 93. In their stead, you've got Clyde Drexler. You got this Blazers team that's pretty good. But slowly but surely, the West has really started to form around them. And the Seattle Supersonics are a sleeping giant. The Seattle Supersonics are a sleeping giant, but Houston Rockets are kind of loud and pronounced. And with Jordan out, Hakeem is bound and determined to win a ring. And they take out they take out the Blazers in the first round in 4 games. It should be noted that first round matchups for up until, I believe, I can't say for sure off the top of my head, but first round matchups used to be out of 5. So Hakeem and the Rockets take out Drexler and the Blazers in 4 games. They would meet the Supersonics, Pippen and Kemp and Peyton, in the Western Conference Finals. This team in real life went 63-19, only to be upset in the first round by the Denver Nuggets. In this timeline, this does not happen, not with Scottie Pippen. They go 66-16. They beat the Rockets in 7 games in the Western Conference Finals, and they go on to defeat the New York Knicks in 7 games. The Seattle Supersonics are the champions in 1994. Year 2 of Jordan's retirement, and it's a doozy. So prior to the trade deadline, Hakeem, in this timeline, he doesn't have the first of what would be 2 repeat rings. He wants another co-star. And as they did in real life, they contact the Blazers about Clyde Drexler, his former teammate in college. Clyde's won 4 rings. He's the cornerstone of this Blazers team. Even without Jordan, it just makes him the top dog. They don't part with him. Clyde doesn't even want to leave. The idea of playing with Hakeem is enticing, but Clyde doesn't leave. Which is good, because Jordan comes back the following month. He comes back in March, a little bit prior to the playoffs, but takes him a little bit to get back into the swing of things, and you'll see, just as it did in real life. Now, Hakeem has also been kind of brushing up with Houston management. They always kind of had an uneasy relationship. The rings, I would say, kind of quelled it for a little bit, but eventually it would get ugly. I say with no championship in hand and with no former co-star to kind of come in and play with him, Hakeem basically demands his way out of Houston. They send him to another frustrated star who wants another guy to kind of come help him out. They send him to Chicago to go play with Charles Barkley and the Bulls. And this Bulls team would, in fact, match up with the Seattle Supersonics, the defending champions. And the team of Barkley and Hakeem put on a show, and they beat those Supersonics in 6 games to capture the 95 NBA championship. Charles Barkley and Hakeem Olajuwon. Barkley feeling perhaps more motivated than ever because he's been the franchise cornerstone of this Chicago team from day one. He's also got, I believe, let's say he has Phil Jackson there too. And aside from Scottie Pippen, they've built a pretty decent team around him. And now you've got Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon right there. As for Dennis Rodman, Dennis Rodman would wind up being acquired by the Portland Trailblazers. Jordan more or less knows that they want, he wants more defense on the team. And he wants a guy that he knows he wants a guy that he knows plays very hard. Physical defense, he can get blocks, that kind of thing. And at this point, Jordan has a lot of influence on the team. This isn't a Jerry Krause situation. This is this is something totally different. So Jordan's able to say, go get me this guy. And they do. So at the end of the 95 season, obviously they lose in the playoffs. The Blazers do. They lose to Seattle in 6. Jordan's a little shaky. He's just not there yet. Enter the following season. Terry Porter is gone. They acquire Dennis Rodman. And Jordan is back, and he's on a tear. He is back with a vengeance. And it shows. He fires off on all cylinders. They take out Seattle in the playoffs in a thrilling 7-game series. The I-5 rivalry is at its all-time best. They head in to the finals against the defending champion Chicago Bulls. And in 7 games, the Blazers are the Kings once again. Not the actual Kings. They win their 5th ring in 6 appearances. And Charles Barkley nursing back and I believe it was back injuries, maybe a knee injury around this time. With ring in hand, he retires in the offseason. In real life, Barkley would kind of keep trying to come back, not quite at 100%, not really as motivated in real life as he is in this timeline. Jordan said it before, he doesn't have the motivation to win a championship. I just think that in this timeline with Hakeem and really having a team behind him from day one as the guy, he has the motivation to get it done once. He doesn't have the motivation to come back and keep going, though. Not with the injuries he's dealing with, not when he's been playing for 12 years. So he retires, and he doesn't keep playing until 2000. That's it for him. Or till 90 through 99, which is good. We instead get Barkley and Hakeem closer to their primes than what we actually got. And there's no Pippen, Barkley, Hakeem. That doesn't happen. So Barkley is gone. It's now Hakeem's Bulls, and they're a decent little team still. It should also be noted that Barkley and Hakeem effectively keep Shaq and the Magic out of the finals, which leads to Shaq still leaving and going to the Lakers. That still happens no matter what. So 96, 97. At this point, Rod Strickland is gone. They acquire a youngster plays some gritty defense by the name of Rasheed Wallace from the Washington Bullets. And of course, and Buck Williams is gone too. They make it all the way to the Western Conference Finals because Jordan's in, of course, overdrive here. And they lose to a very strong Seattle Supersonics team. I believe this was either this year, maybe it would have been the year prior. They had their best season ever in real life. I have no reason not to believe it would have been even better with Scottie Pippen there. So Seattle Supersonics actually take the Blazers out of the playoffs, and there's beginning to be doubts as to how much Clyde Drexler still has in the tank, as well as how much longer Jordan really wants to keep going. Either way, the Supersonics wind up in the finals, and let me see if I had them beating. They beat the New York Knicks in 97. Yeah, I'll go with that. They beat the New York Knicks in 97. To pick up their second ring of the 90s. So that's 2 for Pippen for those keeping score, 2 for Peyton and Kemp as well. Yeah. So, 97-98. No Damon Stoudemire trade. The team just, they have too many pieces that they deem essential. Plus, you got some big contracts there already with Jordan and Drexler and Rodman, and it's just not going to happen. So, they're just in win now mode. They're running it back with what they've got. They take on the Seattle Supersonics in the Western Conference Finals with a lot of people, believing this could be the last time you see Jordan and Drexler. People kind of ready for that changing of the guard, ready for Seattle to kind of come take over and continue their dominance, defend that title. And in a thrilling back and forth 7-game series in which they were down 3-2, the Blazers win 2 back-to-back games off of incredible performances by the likes of Jordan and some clutch shooting by Drexler. And they win the Western Conference Finals. They would go ahead and match up against the Miami Heat, who at this point have Alonzo Mourning, former Hornet, as well as Tim Hardaway, former Warrior. 2 guys who were on 2 fun-to-watch teams in the West and the East that were just outmatched by how strong these other teams were, especially in the 90s. The 90s were such a strong decade for basketball that you look back and Run TMC was so incredible on paper, and then you just remember, oh my gosh, the Sonics, the Bulls, the Jazz, the Lakers, the Barkley Suns, the Rockets, basketball. Everybody had a dog in every fight, unless you were fighting Jordan. Without, of course, a properly stacked team like what has happened here. So, the Blazers match up against Alonzo Mourning, Tim Hardaway, and the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat, who actually, I believe, have the best regular season record in this year, if I'm not mistaken. And in coasting off of what was an incredible series against the Sonics, who many fans would probably have argued at this point are the best team in basketball, or how many people had them pegged to defend the title again. Jordan, Drexler, play like it's 1991, and they win another finals. They take out Miami in 6 games, find them to be a bit easier. Maybe it's their inexperience on a bigger stage. They find them to be a bit easier than the Seattle matchup in the Western Conference Finals. And Jordan, Drexler, and company pick up the 6th ring for Portland in 7 appearances on the decade as a whole. And they wrap up, there goes my pen. They wrap up 2 careers right there. Clyde Drexler is done. He retires. That's it for him. He would retire after the 97-98 season in real life. Same is true here. And Michael Jordan goes on and retires for the 2nd time. From there, he goes on and does his executive stuff. Now, from here, as for the 99 championship, I can't say for sure I can't say for sure, but I'm going to go ahead and say the Spurs and the Sonics wind up in the finals. Either way, whoever comes out of that certainly winds up beating the Knicks in the finals. I have a hard time. I don't know. I have a hard time going against the Sonics in that regard. And, so I would say, yeah, they would get their third ring. I'm doing this part on the fly. This is kind of an epilogue, I guess. They would get their third ring. And then they would basically take the Blazers' place in the 2000 Western Conference Finals. They would essentially go from, hey, we've won 3 titles in the 90s to becoming more or less the sacrificial lamb that would usher in the dominant Lakers era of the 2000s. The Lakers, of course, would come back with Shaq, Kobe Bryant, Phil Jackson at the helm. And Phil Jackson is driven. He's won a championship, one ring in this timeline in the 90s. But he just knows that if he had a team with the market, and if he had a guy right off the bat, and no shade to Charles Barkley, but if he had a Michael Jordan-esque player in his developmental years, as well as a big market to lure a big free agent like a Shaquille O'Neal, that he could create some basketball magic. And wouldn't you know it, he does. He wins. He takes the Lakers to the promised land. In fact, he takes the Lakers to the promised land 3 times. Wouldn't you know? They three-peat, which is incredible. The Blazers technically had a 4-peat in this timeline, but the Lakers, they still 3-peat as normal. Tim Donaghy, where you at? That doesn't involve me. They still get theirs in the end. The Blazers, you got to think all their big stars are gone. They were losing stars up prior to that last season, filling the role gaps with role players, and of course Dennis Rodman helps. Rodman would kind of fit in with the Portland culture because he's a bit of a weirdo, and they're kind of weird, and they embrace weird. Weird loves weird. Rodman would kind of bump elbows with people kind of the wrong way. He still winds up getting traded out of there. I think afterward he wound up going to the Lakers, and then he winds up in Dallas, which is a fun trivia question answer for those keeping score, for those with trash brain like me. And that's it. He's done, I believe, in 2000. So these Blazers are kind of in a bit of a tailspin. They don't really have any big stars. They were kind of, drafting late or trading picks to pick up role players, that kind of thing, to keep, with their big contract guys. And Jordan and Drexler leaving, that leaves just a blast crater. So it's pretty much, and they didn't do the Damon Stoudemire trade either. So it's Rasheed Wallace really kind of holding stuff together here. Blazers post some pretty bad records, but they play some decent defense. Wallace he's a big fish in a small pond. He is, kind of a defensive dog. He's becoming known for getting teed up and getting ejected and stuff, but he plays with a lot of heart. However, it becomes a little too much for him to take. And in 2003, just ahead of the NBA draft, he requests and is granted a trade. And the Blazers send Rasheed Wallace to the Detroit Pistons in exchange for the number 2 pick in the draft. Among other things, whatever specifics you want to get into. And now Portland, a few years removed from arguably being the team of the 90s and one of the greatest runs in sports history. are now faced with well, the toughest decision they've had since 1984. LeBron James is clearly the number one guy. He gets picked by he's going to go to Cleveland and play for, his home state. But now you've got, three future Hall of Famers in this draft to pick from. But that is maybe a different episode, if we come back to this timeline anyway. That's a whole other story. They take Darko. I'm kidding. I'm only kidding. Maybe. Anyway, if you've stuck with me the whole way, thank you. If you give this a listen, let me know what you think. Is this all bullshit? Did you love it? Did you hate it? I hope you didn't hate it. I hope you understand this is fake. If you're a Blazers fan, bathe in the glow of the 6 fake championships, and know that there's a timeline in which they happen. If you like what you heard here, please be sure to like us on Facebook, Long Shots Sportscast, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And please, stay tuned because we've got more stuff down the pipeline. We're basically, the show's kind of be, I'm going to do a story time on, kind of another other timeline thing as I kind of crack down on, or try to crack open rather, the greatest what if scenarios in sports. We'll follow that up with kind of a full show with me and the guys, breaking it down, kind of Talking Dead style. And then I'll get right into another one, kind of preview the next one. So I hope you enjoyed what you heard here. And stay tuned for the next one. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it now. Next time, let's go ahead and plan it for 2 weeks from right now. We're going to see what would happen if Aaron Rodgers got drafted number 1 by the San Francisco 49ers. I'm already running it through in my brain. I'm super excited to see what comes out of it. So anyway, take care. I hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, go watch some 80s and 90s basketball online. Go watch some Magic Johnson. He just go do it. Go right now. Go.